The billionaire CEO's hands were still shaking when she watched the security footage for the third time. On screen, the auto mechanic who'd just paid for her dinner with his last $20 had no idea the woman sitting across from him owned half the city. But what made Sienna Cross's breath catch wasn't his kindness. It was the way he'd smiled at her like she was worth something, even when she pretended to be nobody. For a woman who'd spent 5 years testing men for gold-digging hearts, this single father with grease under his fingernails was about to become the most dangerous test of all. Because this time, Sienna wasn't sure who was really being tested anymore. Before we dive into this story, I invite you to follow along until the very end. If you enjoy it, please hit the like button and comment with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The restaurant was called Marco's, and it smelled like garlic bread and broken promises. Sienna Cross sat in the back corner booth wearing a Target clearance dress and makeup she'd deliberately smudged to look tired. Her real Cartier watch sat locked in her penthouse safe 12 miles away. The knockoff Timex on her wrist right now had cost her $9 at a gas station, and it told her she'd been waiting for 23 minutes. He wasn't coming. She should have felt relieved. That's what happened with the last 4 men she'd tested this way. They'd taken one look at Celia, the struggling waitress who couldn't split a check, and suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. Which was exactly the point. Sienna had learned the hard way that powerful men only wanted 2 things from her: access to her money or leverage over her empire. The disguise was her filter, the ultimate pre-screening. If they failed the first date, they never got close enough to hurt her. She was reaching for her purse when the door chimed. A man stumbled through it, breathing hard like he'd been running. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded blue work shirt with an oil stain across the chest that soap had given up trying to remove. His dark hair was damp with sweat, pushed back from his face in that careless way that meant he'd been working, not primping. When his eyes found hers across the restaurant, something in Sienna's chest did a complicated thing she hadn't felt in years. He looked real. "I'm so sorry." He was already talking as he crossed the room, his voice rough and genuine. "I got held up at the shop. Customer emergency. Transmission gave out on the freeway and she had her kids in the car. I couldn't just leave her there. It's fine." Sienna heard herself say it before her brain caught up. She'd planned to look annoyed, disappointed. This was supposed to be a test. But Caleb Hunter dropped into the seat across from her looking so genuinely apologetic that her carefully prepared coldness evaporated. "It's not fine," he said firmly, meeting her eyes. "You waited. I'm 30 minutes late to meet you for the first time. That's disrespectful as hell, and I'm sorry." Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the kind of exhaustion that came from too many double shifts and not enough sleep. There was a small cut healing on his left hand, and his knuckles were permanently stained with engine grease no amount of scrubbing would ever fully remove. This was a man who worked with his hands, who showed up even when he was dead tired, who apologized like he meant it. Sienna's carefully constructed cynicism began developing cracks. "Really?" she said, and this time her voice came out softer than she intended. "It's okay. I'm Celia." She'd been using the fake name for 6 months now. It didn't even feel like lying anymore. "Caleb." His handshake was firm, his palm rough with calluses. "And I promise I'm not usually this much of a disaster. My sister set this up, and I told her I'm not really in a place to be dating. But she said you sounded nice, and honestly..." He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I think she's just worried I'm going to turn into a hermit who only talks to carburetors." Despite herself, Sienna smiled. "Are you turning into a hermit?" "Maybe a little." His answering grin was crooked, self-deprecating. "My kid says I talk about spark plugs too much at dinner. He's 6. If a 6-year-old is calling you boring, that's a problem." "Your kid." The dating profile her assistant had created for Celia had mentioned she was open to dating single fathers. Sienna had added that detail specifically because single dads were supposed to be too busy to dig into her background, too focused on their children to care about gold digging. But sitting across from Caleb now, watching the way his entire face changed when he mentioned his son, softening with a fierce, protective kind of love, she felt something twist in her chest that had nothing to do with strategy. "I think spark plugs are underrated dinner conversation," she heard herself say. He laughed, and the sound was warm and unexpected, and Sienna realized with creeping horror that she was enjoying herself. This was supposed to be a test, not a real date. The waiter appeared, bored and impatient, and Caleb ordered a burger without looking at the prices. Sienna, playing her part, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a side salad, and made a show of counting the cash in her wallet with barely concealed anxiety. She'd done this 4 times before. This was the moment men usually started calculating whether she was worth the investment, whether her body or her companionship was valuable enough to cover the cost of her meal. Caleb didn't even blink. "You know what?" he said easily, flagging down the waiter before he left. "Actually, she'll have the pasta, the chicken one, and bring us mozzarella sticks to start." "I can't," Sienna started, right on script. "It is my fault you had to wait," Caleb said, and his voice held no pity, no calculation, just simple generosity. "Let me buy you dinner, please. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like an asshole all night, and I already feel like enough of one for being late." The waiter left. Sienna sat frozen, her carefully prepared lines evaporating. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The men she tested fell into predictable categories. The ones who disappeared the moment they realized she couldn't pay. The ones who grudgingly covered the check but made sure she knew she owed them later. The ones who suggested splitting it, then got angry when she asked them to cover her half too. But Caleb Hunter just ordered her a real meal like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yeah, I did." He leaned back, and there was something steady in his gaze that made her want to look away. "My mom raised me better than to let someone go hungry because I showed up late. Tell me about your son." She hadn't meant to ask. The question just escaped, genuine and unscripted. Caleb's entire face transformed. It was like watching the sun come out. "His name's Owen," he said, and suddenly he wasn't a tired mechanic anymore. He was a father, and the love in his voice was so naked and real it made Sienna's throat tight. "He's 6.5. The half is very important to him. He's obsessed with dinosaurs right now. We've watched Jurassic Park so many times, I can recite the whole thing. He wants to be a paleontologist, but also a firefighter, but also run an ice cream truck. He's keeping his options open. Smart kid. So keishi o chigitaritz. He's the best thing I ever did." Caleb said it simply, like it was fact. His mom died when he was 2, cancer. It happened fast. "I'm so sorry." "Yeah." He looked down at his hands, and Sienna saw the grief there, worn smooth by time but never really gone. It was hell. Still is some days, but Owen, man, that kid saved my life, gave me a reason to keep getting up. I couldn't fall apart because he needed me, you know? So I didn't. The mozzarella sticks arrived. Caleb pushed them toward her without thinking, and Sienna found herself taking one just to have something to do with her hands. This was dangerous territory. She was supposed to be testing him, not getting emotionally invested, not learning about his dead wife and his 6-year-old son and the way his voice cracked just slightly when he talked about the hardest years of his life. "What about you?" Caleb asked, dragging a mozzarella stick through marinara sauce. "Your profile said you work at a diner?" "Right, the cover story." "Yes, Sienna lied, and it tasted bitter on her tongue. "Downtown. 3rd shift mostly. The tips are better at night." "That's brutal. You work tonight?" "Day off." "Lucky me." He grinned, and it was so genuine that Sienna felt something inside her chest crack wider. "So what do you do on your days off, besides meet disastrous mechanics who show up late?" She should have had an answer ready, should have prepared this. "I don't know," she said instead, and it was the most honest thing she'd said all night. "I work a lot. I don't really do anything else." "Yeah, I get that." Caleb nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "Sometimes it feels like all I do is work and take care of Owen. My sister keeps telling me I need hobbies, but I'm like, hobbies cost money and time, and I got neither of those things lying around." Their food arrived. Caleb ate like someone who'd been running on empty for hours, but he kept glancing up at her between bites, asking questions that felt genuine. What kind of music did she like? Had she always lived in the city? What was the weirdest thing that ever happened during a shift? Sienna found herself answering carefully, stitching together a fake life from pieces of truth. She talked about feeling invisible at work, which was true, even if the work was running a tech empire instead of slinging hash. She mentioned loving old movies, also true. She said she'd learned not to trust people easily. That was the truest thing of all. I get that, Caleb said quietly, and something in his voice made her look up. Trust is hard, especially after you've been burned. Yum. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Yeah. He set down his burger, his expression going distant. Owen's mom and we were good, solid. But before her, I dated someone who lied about pretty much everything, found out she was using me to get information about my old boss's company. Industrial espionage type shit. I was young and stupid and didn't see it coming. Sienna's water glass stopped halfway to her mouth. What happened? She disappeared once she got what she needed. I lost my job. Almost lost a lot more than that. Caleb's jaw tightened. I learned the hard way that some people see other people as tools, as things they can use and throw away. The irony wasn't lost on Sienna. Here she was, lying about her identity to test whether he was lying about his intentions, using him as a tool to prove her theory that all men were untrustworthy. She set down her water glass carefully. Did you ever trust anyone again? She asked, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. After that? Yeah. Caleb met her eyes. I trusted Sarah, Owen's mom. She was real, honest. She didn't play games, and even though I lost her, I don't regret trusting her, not for a second. Something twisted, sharp, and painful beneath Sienna's ribs. You're braver than me, she whispered. Nah. He shook his head. I think you're brave too. You're here, aren't you? Taking a chance on some random guy your friend set you up with. That takes guts. If only he knew. They finished eating. Caleb paid the check without making a production of it, leaving a generous tip that Sienna noted with surprise. A man who was barely scraping by, and he still took care of the server. Outside, the night air was cool and smelled like rain coming. The parking lot was half empty, streetlights casting long shadows across the asphalt. I'm parked over there, Sienna said, pointing to the beat-up Honda Civic she'd borrowed from her housekeeper specifically for these dates. Her real car, a Mercedes she'd paid for with her first major investment deal, was safely hidden in her private garage. I'll walk you. You don't have to, Yeah, I do. Caleb smiled, but there was something serious underneath it. I was raised right, remember? They walked in silence for a moment. Sienna was acutely aware of how close he was, how his presence felt solid and steady and safe in a way she hadn't experienced in years. This was a mistake. She was falling for her own test. Can I be honest with you? Caleb asked suddenly, stopping beside her car. Sienna's heart kicked into her throat. Okay, I didn't want to come tonight. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly vulnerable. I told my sister I wasn't ready, that I was too busy, too tired, too focused on Owen, that I didn't have space in my life for anyone else. Oh. Disappointment flooded through her, sharp and surprising. I understand, but I'm glad she made me come anyway, Caleb continued, meeting her eyes. Because you're not what I expected. I don't know, you feel real. You don't feel like you're performing. And I haven't felt that in a long time. The irony of it nearly choked her. You feel real, he'd said. She was the least real thing in his entire world. I'd like to see you again, Caleb said quietly. If you want to. No pressure. I know I'm probably not what you're looking for. Single dad, works too much, can't afford fancy restaurants. Yes. The word escaped before Sienna could stop it. Yes? He looked surprised, hopeful. Yes, I'd like to see you again. It was the worst decision she'd made in 5 years. She knew it even as she said it. This was supposed to be a one-time test. Pass or fail, then walk away. But Caleb Hunter had passed so thoroughly, so completely, that Sienna Cross, billionaire CEO and professional cynic, couldn't bring herself to end it. Yeah? His smile was bright enough to hurt. Okay, good. That's great. He asked for her number. She gave him the burner phone number attached to Celia's fake identity. They stood there for another moment, awkward and uncertain, and then Caleb did something that stopped Sienna's heart completely. He hugged her. Not a predatory move, not a test to see what she'd allow. Just a warm, genuine hug that smelled like motor oil and laundry detergent and something indefinably kind. "Thanks for giving me a shot," he said against her hair, even though I showed up late looking like I just crawled out from under a car. "You kind of did crawl out from under a car," Sienna managed, her voice muffled against his chest. He laughed, and the sound rumbled through her. "Fair point." But they separated. Caleb waited until she was safely in her car with the doors locked before he headed to his own vehicle, a battered pickup truck that had seen better decades. Sienna sat in the borrowed Honda, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd tested him. He'd passed. The experiment was over, except it wasn't over, not even close. Because for the first time in 5 years, Sienna Cross had met someone who made her want to stop testing and start trusting. And that terrified her more than any corporate betrayal ever had. Her penthouse looked exactly the way she'd left it that morning. Cold, expensive, and empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. White marble floors reflected track lighting that cost more than most people's cars. Abstract art that Sienna didn't particularly like, but had been told was important, hung on walls the color of new snow. Everything here screamed wealth, power, success. None of it felt like home. Sienna kicked off the cheap Target flats and padded barefoot to her office, pulling out her phone. The burner phone with Celia's number sat on her desk, already showing a new message. "Caleb. Made it home. Owen was still up. Bedtime is apparently a suggestion, not a rule. Told him I had a good night. He asked if you like dinosaurs." Very important question, apparently. Despite everything, Sienna smiled. "Celia. Tell Owen I think dinosaurs are extremely cool, especially velociraptors." The response came fast. "Caleb. He says you have good taste. Also wants to know if you've seen Jurassic World. This is now a job interview, apparently." Celia. "I have seen Jurassic World. The first one was better." Caleb. "Okay, you're hired. Owen approves. Can I take you out again this weekend? There's a diner near my place that does breakfast all day. Fair warning, it's not fancy, but their pancakes are incredible." Sienna stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was where she was supposed to stop. Thank him politely, make an excuse, disappear back into her real life. The test was complete. She'd proven that good men existed, men who would treat Celia with respect even when they thought she had nothing to offer. That should have been enough. But her fingers moved without permission. "Celia, I'd love that." She hit send before she could change her mind. Her real phone, the one connected to Sienna Cross, CEO, buzzed on the desk. A text from her business partner, Damien Voss. "Damien, board meeting moved to 7 a.m. tomorrow. Johnson wants to discuss the Apex merger. Be ready." Sienna felt the familiar weight settle back onto her shoulders. This was her real world. Boardrooms and mergers and men like Damien who measured everything in profit margins and power plays. This was who she really was. Not Celia, the struggling waitress who couldn't afford pasta. Not the woman who'd sat in Marco's tonight feeling something dangerously close to hope. She was Sienna Cross, 30 years old, billionaire, CEO of Crosstech Industries, the company she'd built from nothing after her father's associates tried to push her out. She'd spent 5 years proving she was smarter, tougher, more ruthless than any of them. She'd survived corporate sabotage, hostile takeovers, and 3 men who'd tried to marry her for her stock options. She'd learned that power was the only thing people respected, that vulnerability was weakness, that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. And now here she was, risking everything because a mechanic with kind eyes had bought her dinner without thinking twice. The smart thing would be to end it now. But Sienna had spent 5 years being smart. Just once, she wanted to be reckless. Basen. Saturday morning, Sienna found herself in another borrowed outfit, jeans from Target, a sweater that was warm but not expensive, sneakers that had been carefully scuffed to look worn. She'd practiced the transformation so many times it took less than 20 minutes now. Designer suits became clearance rack basics. The confident CEO posture softened into something smaller, less certain. Even her voice changed, less commanding, more hesitant. Becoming Celia was like putting on armor in reverse, stripping away every layer of power until all that was left was the woman underneath. The woman she'd almost forgotten existed. The diner Caleb had mentioned was called Rosie's, and it looked like it had been there since the 50s and planned to stay there until the sun burned out. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, a jukebox in the corner that probably still worked. Caleb was already there, sitting in a booth near the window with a small boy who had his father's dark hair and his mother's eyes, or at least Sienna assumed they were his mother's eyes, from the way Caleb's expression went soft and sad when he looked at them. Owen Hunter was 6 years old and utterly fearless. "Are you Celia?" he demanded the moment she approached, looking her up and down with the brutal honesty only children possessed. "Dad said you were nice. Are you nice?" "Owen," Caleb said, mortified. "We talked about this. I try to be nice," Sienna said, sliding into the booth across from them. "Are you Owen?" "Yes, I'm 6.5. Do you like dinosaurs?" "I think dinosaurs are very cool." "What's your favorite?" This felt like a test more rigorous than any board meeting. "Velociraptor," Sienna said, remembering the text conversation. Owen's face split into a gap-toothed grin. "Dad, she has good taste." "I told you," Caleb said, and when his eyes met Sienna's over his son's head, there was something in them that made her breath catch. Gratitude, maybe. Or relief that she was playing along, being kind to his kid. Or maybe something more dangerous than that. They ordered breakfast. Owen insisted on chocolate chip pancakes and spent the entire meal telling Sienna detailed facts about pterodactyls, not technically dinosaurs, he informed her seriously, while Caleb tried to get him to actually eat instead of just talking. It was chaotic and loud and sticky, and Sienna found herself laughing more than she had in months. "Sorry," Caleb said at one point, after Owen had launched into his third straight minute of explaining why the Indominus Rex was scientifically inaccurate. "He gets excited. Don't apologize." Well, Sienna meant it. "He's amazing." "He is pretty great," Caleb agreed, looking at his son with uncomplicated love. "Even when he's a dinosaur-obsessed tornado." "I heard that," Owen said without looking up from his pancakes. "You were meant to," Caleb told him. Watching them together did something strange to Sienna's chest. This was what family looked like when it wasn't a corporate dynasty or a strategic alliance. This was just a father and son who loved each other, surviving together, making it work. It was the most real thing she'd seen in years. After breakfast, Owen announced he had to show Celia something very important, which turned out to be the park across the street where he proceeded to narrate an elaborate game involving dinosaurs, aliens, and the swing set. Caleb and Sienna sat on a bench watching him play, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "He likes you," Caleb said quietly. "I like him too." It was terrifyingly true. He's a good kid. "The best kid." Caleb was quiet for a moment. His mom would have loved seeing him like this. Happy, loud, just being 6. "You're doing a good job," Sienna said, and meant it with every cell in her body. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have him." Caleb turned to look at her, and his expression was open in a way that made her want to look away. "Can I ask you something?" Sienna's pulse kicked. "Okay, why'd you say yes? To seeing me again?" He looked genuinely confused. "I mean, I showed up late to our first date looking like I'd been wrestling cars all day. I can't take you anywhere fancy. I've got a 6-year-old and a full-time job and approximately 0 free time. You could do better." The laugh that escaped her was sharp and painful. "You think I could do better?" she repeated. "Yeah." He said it like it was obvious. "You're smart, you're funny, you're beautiful. Stop. And you seem like you've got your life together more than I do. Caleb, stop." Sienna pressed her hands to her face, feeling the weight of the lies pressing down on her lungs. "You don't know anything about me." "Then tell me," he said simply. "I want to know." This was her chance. Right here, she could tell him the truth. Explain about the tests, the disguise, the billion-dollar company she ran from a corner office with a view that cost more than his truck. She could end this before it got worse. But Owen chose that moment to run over, breathless and excited, demanding that Celia come push him on the swings. And Sienna found herself standing up, following the 6-year-old, pushing him higher while he shrieked with laughter. And Caleb stood off to the side, watching them both with an expression that made Sienna's carefully constructed walls crack wider. Oh, 2 weeks became 3. 3 became a month. Sienna fell into a double life that should have exhausted her, but instead made her feel more alive than she had in years. During the day, she was Sienna Cross. She wore Armani and Louboutin. She decimated competitors in boardrooms, made billion-dollar decisions before lunch, and reminded powerful men why they'd learned to fear her. But 3 nights a week, she became Celia. She traded her penthouse for Caleb's modest apartment above his garage. She helped Owen with his homework at a kitchen table that wobbled because one leg was shorter than the others. She ate takeout Chinese food from containers and learned that Caleb could cook exactly 3 things: spaghetti, grilled cheese, and something he called breakfast scramble, that was basically whatever was left in the fridge mixed with eggs. It should have felt like slumming. Instead, it felt like coming home. "You're different here," Caleb said one night after Owen had gone to bed. They were sitting on his ratty couch, the TV playing an old movie neither of them was really watching. Sienna's heart jumped into her throat. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." He frowned like he was trying to figure it out. When you first show up, you're always kind of tense, wound up. But then after you've been here for a while, you relax, like you're finally comfortable. "Because I'm pretending to be someone I'm not," Sienna thought. "Because when I'm Celia, I don't have to be the woman who trusts no one and fears everything. Maybe I'm just comfortable with you." "Eat," she said instead, which was also dangerously true. Caleb's smile was soft and real. "Yeah, I'm comfortable with you too." He kissed her for the first time that night, gentle and unhurried, like he was afraid she might break, or like he was afraid he might wake up and discover she wasn't real. Sienna kissed him back and felt her carefully constructed double life tilt dangerously off its axis. She was falling in love with him, with the mechanic who worked double shifts and raised his son alone and treated her like she mattered even when he thought she was nobody, with the man who'd passed her test so completely that the test itself had become irrelevant. And the worst part, the truly terrible part, was that he was falling for a woman who didn't exist. The cracks started showing on a Tuesday. Sienna was in her office at Crosstech, reviewing acquisition documents, when her assistant knocked. "Mr. Voss is here," Elena said, and something in her tone made Sienna look up. Damien Voss walked in without waiting for permission. He was 53, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and had been Sienna's business partner since she took over the company. He'd backed her when the board tried to push her out, helped her navigate hostile takeovers, made her rich beyond anything she'd imagined. She owed him everything. She also didn't trust him an inch. "We need to talk," Damien said, closing the door behind him. "About the Apex merger? About you." He sat down across from her desk, his expression unreadable. "You've been distracted lately, leaving early, taking personal calls. That's not like you." Sienna kept her face neutral. "I'm entitled to a personal life." "Of course you are." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just concerned. We're in the middle of delicate negotiations. The board is watching. If they sense weakness—" "There's no weakness," Sienna said flatly. "I'm handling the merger. Everything's on track." "What?" "Good." Damien stood, smoothing his tie. "Because we've worked too hard to build this company. I'd hate to see you lose focus now, over something or someone who isn't worth it." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. After he left, Sienna sat at her desk staring at the city below and felt the first cold touch of real fear. Damien was having her watched, which meant it was only a matter of time before he discovered Caleb. She should end it, right now, before anyone got hurt. Send Caleb a text, make an excuse, disappear back into her real life where she was safe and powerful and completely alone. But that night, when she showed up at Caleb's apartment wearing her Celia disguise, and Owen hugged her and Caleb smiled at her like she was the best thing that had happened to him in years, Sienna couldn't do it. She couldn't walk away. Not yet, even though she knew she was leading them both toward disaster. The lie started unraveling on a Wednesday afternoon when Owen Hunter brought home a permission slip for a school field trip to the Science Museum. "Can Celia come?" he asked his father that evening, bouncing on the couch cushions with the permission slip clutched in his fist. "Ms. Rodriguez said parents can bring guests if they want, please?" Caleb looked up from the transmission diagram he'd been studying, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. Buddy, Celia works during the day. She can't just take time off. But it's on Saturday, Owen insisted. She doesn't work Saturdays, she told me. Which was true. Celia, the waitress, had Saturdays off, according to the carefully constructed schedule Sienna had invented. Sienna, the CEO, on the other hand, had a board meeting scheduled for Saturday morning that she absolutely could not miss. The Apex merger was hanging by a thread, and 3 board members were already questioning her focus. I'll ask her, Caleb said, ruffling his son's hair, but no promises, okay? She might have other plans. That night, when Sienna showed up at the apartment with cheap wine and cheaper pizza, Caleb brought it up while Owen was brushing his teeth. You don't have to say yes, he said quickly, loading paper plates into the trash because apparently they'd run out of clean dishes again. I know it's a lot to ask, but he really likes you, and honestly, I think he's starting to see you as... He stopped himself, but Sienna knew what he'd been about to say. As family. Her throat went tight. What time? 9 in the morning. It's like a 4-hour thing. But seriously, if you can't, I'll be there, Sienna heard herself say, even though she could already feel the disaster looming. I want to be there. The smile that broke across Caleb's face was worth every lie she'd ever told and every lie she was going to have to tell to make this work. She rescheduled the board meeting for Sunday, claiming a scheduling conflict. Damien sent back a one-line email. This is becoming a pattern. Sienna deleted it and tried not to think about the consequences. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Sienna stood in her walk-in closet, staring at 2 completely different versions of herself hanging side by side. On the left, a Chanel suit she was supposed to wear to the board meeting. On the right, the Target jeans and thrift store jacket that Celia would wear to a field trip with a 6-year-old who thought she was just his dad's girlfriend. She chose the jeans. The Science Museum was crawling with elementary schoolers and exhausted parents. Sienna found Caleb and Owen near the dinosaur exhibit, where Owen was already deep in conversation with another kid about whether T-Rex could actually see you if you stood still. You came! Owen launched himself at her, wrapping both arms around her waist with the fierce enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned to guard his heart. Of course I came, Sienna said, and the guilt tasted like copper on her tongue. Caleb kissed her cheek, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that felt natural and right and completely doomed. Thanks for doing this. It means a lot. They spent 4 hours trailing behind a pack of first graders, watching Owen's face light up at every exhibit, listening to him explain with passionate authority why the planetarium show got the asteroid belt wrong. At lunch, Caleb bought sandwiches from the museum cafe that cost twice what they should have, and Sienna watched him carefully count out the bills from his wallet, making sure he had enough. This man worked 60-hour weeks to afford field trip lunches and dinosaur encyclopedias. He drove a truck held together by rust and determination. He probably hadn't bought himself new clothes in 2 years, and Sienna was sitting there wearing a fake life, pretending she understood what it meant to struggle. You okay? Caleb asked quietly, while Owen was distracted by a display of meteorites. Yeah, Sienna lied. Just tired. We can leave early if you want. No. She caught his hand, squeezing it. I'm good. Really? But she wasn't good. She was falling deeper into a deception that was going to hurt everyone involved, especially the 6-year-old boy who'd started drawing pictures of the 3 of them together and hanging them on the refrigerator with dinosaur magnets. On the drive back to Caleb's place, Owen fell asleep in his booster seat, exhausted from excitement. Sienna sat in the passenger seat of Caleb's truck, watching the city slide past, feeling the weight of her double life pressing down on her chest. Can I tell you something? Caleb said quietly, his eyes on the road. Okay. I didn't think I'd ever feel like this again. He glanced at her briefly, then back at the traffic. After Sarah died, I figured that was it. I had my shot at happiness, and it was over. I'd just focus on Owen and work, and that would be enough. Sienna's throat closed up. But then I met you, Caleb continued, and it's like, I don't know. It's like waking up after being asleep for 4 years. Owen sees it too. He asked me last night if you were going to be his new mom. The words hit Sienna like a physical blow. "What did you tell him?" she managed. "I told him it's too early for that kind of talk." Caleb's voice was careful, gentle. "But honestly, I'm starting to hope the answer is yes. Someday, if you want that." This was the moment, right here in the truck, with Owen sleeping in the back and Caleb offering her a future built on lies she'd constructed. This was when she should tell the truth. Instead, she reached over and took Caleb's hand. "I want that too," she whispered, and hated herself for meaning it. That night, after Owen was in bed and Caleb had fallen asleep on the couch with his arm around her, Sienna carefully extracted herself and went to the bathroom. She locked the door, turned on the fan to cover the sound, and called her assistant on her real phone. "Elena, I need you to do something for me." "It's 11 at night, Miss Cross. I know. I need you to run a background check, quietly. No official channels." A pause. "On who?" Sienna closed her eyes. "Caleb Hunter, age 32, lives on 5th Street above Hunter's Auto Repair. Single father. I need to know everything." Another pause, longer this time. "May I ask why?" "No." "Understood. I'll have something by Monday." Sienna hung up and stared at herself in Caleb's small, spotted mirror. The woman looking back at her was wearing a borrowed life and falling in love with a man who thought he knew her. The worst part was, she wasn't even sure which version of herself was the real one anymore. Monday morning, Elena dropped a manila envelope on Sienna's desk without a word. Sienna waited until she was alone before opening it. Caleb Hunter. Born in Seattle, moved to the city 12 years ago. Married Sarah Chen at 24. Lost her to ovarian cancer when he was 28. Worked as a mechanic for Grayson Automotive until 6 years ago, when he abruptly quit and opened his own shop. That was the part that made Sienna's blood go cold. Grayson Automotive was a subsidiary of Meridian Industries, and Meridian Industries had been acquired by Crosstech 3 years ago in a deal that Damien had personally overseen. She kept reading. According to the report, Caleb had been present during a workplace accident at Grayson that killed 2 mechanics. The official investigation ruled it equipment failure. Caleb had refused to comment publicly and left the company 2 weeks later. Sienna picked up her office phone and dialed the number for her head of legal. "Marcus, I need the files on the Meridian acquisition. Everything, especially anything related to Grayson Automotive." "That was 3 years ago, Miss Cross. Those files are archived. I want them on my desk by end of day." She hung up before he could argue. The files arrived at 6 p.m., 3 boxes worth of documents and depositions and financial records. Sienna sent her assistant home and locked her office door. She read until midnight. The picture that emerged made her stomach turn. The accident at Grayson hadn't been an accident. Someone had tampered with the hydraulic lifts, causing them to fail during a routine maintenance check. 2 mechanics died instantly. 3 others were injured, including one who'd been paralyzed from the waist down. The internal investigation had been shut down fast. Too fast. Settlement checks were issued. NDAs were signed. The whole thing disappeared. And according to the paper trail, the person who'd orchestrated the cover-up was Damien Voss. Sienna sat back in her leather chair, staring at the city lights below, trying to process what she'd just learned. Caleb knew. He had to know. He'd been there. He'd seen what happened. And he'd left the company rather than fight it, probably because he had a 2-year-old son and couldn't risk making powerful enemies. But the evidence hadn't disappeared. According to a note in one of the files, a former employee had claimed to have documentation proving the tampering. That employee was Caleb Hunter. Sienna's hands were shaking. Caleb had evidence that could destroy Damien, which meant Damien probably knew about Caleb. And if Damien knew about Caleb and he'd been having Sienna watched, then... Her phone rang. Her real phone. Damien's name flashed on the screen. Sienna let it ring twice before answering. "We need to meet," Damien said without preamble. "Now." "It's almost midnight. I'll be at your office in 20 minutes. Make sure you're alone." He hung up. Sienna stood there, her heart hammering, surrounded by evidence that her business partner was a criminal, and the man she was falling in love with was the only person who could prove it. The knock on her office door came exactly 20 minutes later. Damien walked in looking like he'd come straight from a dinner event. Tuxedo, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He closed the door behind him and locked it. "You've been seeing someone," he said flatly. Sienna kept her face neutral. That's none of your business. It is when it affects the company. Damien moved to her desk, picking up one of the files she'd been reading. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Caleb Hunter, small-time mechanic, former Grayson employee, father of one. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. How long have you been having me followed? Sienna asked quietly. Long enough. Damien set down the file. You want to tell me why you're digging into Meridian? That deal closed 3 years ago. I'm thorough. You're compromised. He leaned against her desk, and for the first time since she'd known him, Sienna saw something dangerous beneath his polished exterior. This man you're seeing, do you have any idea what kind of liability he represents? He's not a liability, Ski. He has evidence, Sienna. Damien's voice went cold. Documentation from the Grayson accident, proof that the equipment was sabotaged. He's been sitting on it for 6 years, probably waiting for the right moment to use it. Or maybe he's just trying to protect his son and move on with his life, Sienna shot back. You don't actually believe that. Damien laughed, and the sound was ugly. Come on, you're smarter than this. He found out who you are, and yes, he knows. I guarantee he knows. And now he's playing you. Getting close, making you trust him, waiting for the perfect moment to leverage what he has. You're wrong. Am I? Damien pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it to face her. This was taken 2 hours ago. The photo showed Caleb standing outside his garage, talking to a man in an expensive suit. The man's face was partially obscured, but his posture screamed lawyer or investigator. Who is that? Sienna demanded. Someone asking questions about Crosstech's acquisition history. Damien pocketed his phone. Your mechanic is making moves, Sienna. And you're so busy playing dress-up and pretending to be poor that you can't see you're being used. The words hit like acid. Get out, Sienna said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my office, now. Damien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he straightened, adjusting his cuffs. I've protected you since you took over this company, he said softly. I've made you rich. I've made you powerful. I've dealt with every threat that came your way, including the ones you never even knew existed. What did you do? The question came out hoarse. What I had to. Damien moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the lock. That accident at Grayson? Those men were going to blow the whistle on a supplier fraud scheme that would have tanked the entire Meridian deal. I couldn't let that happen. We would have lost everything. So you killed them. I protected our interests. He said it like it was obvious, like it was reasonable. And I've been protecting them ever since, including from people who might use old evidence to destroy what we've built. The threat was crystal clear. If you touch him, Sienna started. I won't have to touch him, Damien interrupted, because you're going to end it, tonight. Cut him loose, walk away, and we'll make sure that evidence disappears permanently. Everyone wins. And if I don't? Isham. Damien's smile was cold enough to frost glass. Then I'll do what I have to do, and you won't like how that ends. For anyone. He unlocked the door and left. Sienna stood alone in her office, surrounded by evidence of murder and corruption, and realized she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. Not falling for Caleb. Trusting Damien. She grabbed her real phone and her burner phone, shoved the Meridian files into her briefcase, and ran. The drive to Caleb's apartment took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Sienna's hand shook on the steering wheel. She'd changed out of her work clothes in the car, pulling on Celia's jeans and jacket at stoplights, transforming herself without thinking about it. But this time, the disguise felt like a cage. She parked in front of the garage and took the stairs 2 at a time. The light was still on in Caleb's living room. She could hear the television through the door. She knocked. Caleb answered in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, his hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it. The smile that started on his face died when he saw her expression. What's wrong? We need to talk. He stepped aside, letting her in. Owen was already asleep, his bedroom door closed. The living room was a mess of toys and homework papers and the comfortable chaos of a life being lived. Sienna turned to face him, her heart pounding. Who did you meet with today? She asked. Outside the garage, man in a suit. Caleb's expression went carefully neutral. How do you know about that? Please just answer the question. He studied her for a long moment, and Sienna watched something shift in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or suspicion. He was a lawyer, Caleb said slowly, asking about my time at Grayson Automotive. What did you tell him? Nothing. Caleb crossed his arms. Why are you asking me this, Celia? Or should I call you something else? The floor dropped out from under her. You know, she whispered, I've known for 3 weeks. His voice was flat, emotionless. You think I wouldn't recognize Sienna Cross? Your face is on the news, on billboards, in business magazines. I might be a mechanic, but I'm not blind. Sienna felt like she was drowning. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to see how long you'd keep lying to me. The anger was starting to show now, cracking through his careful control. I wanted to know if the woman I was falling in love with was even real, or if it was just some kind of sick game to you. It wasn't a game. Then what was it? Caleb demanded. You pretended to be poor. You let me buy you dinner with money I couldn't afford to spend. You met my son. You made us both care about you. And the whole time, you were lying about everything. I was trying to protect myself, Sienna said desperately. I've been used before. Betrayed. I needed to know if you were real. Cool. If I was real? Caleb laughed, and the sound was bitter. That's rich. You're a billionaire playing dress-up, and you want to talk to me about being real? Yes! The word came out too loud. Sienna lowered her voice, aware of Owen sleeping down the hall. Yes, because every man I ever trusted used me for my money or my connections or my power. I needed to know if someone could love me for who I am, not what I have. And what? Caleb's eyes were hard. You decided I passed your little test? Is that what this was? You checked all your boxes, made sure the poor mechanic was good enough for the billionaire CEO? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Sienna? He spat her real name like an accusation. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you used me, used my son. Let us get attached to someone who doesn't even exist. The words cut deeper than any corporate betrayal ever had. I fell in love with you, Sienna said, her voice breaking. That wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to test you and walk away, but I couldn't because you were kind and real, and you made me feel like I mattered, not my bank account or my company, but me. And I haven't felt that in years. Stop. Caleb held up a hand. Just stop. You don't get to do this. You don't get to lie to me for months and then expect me to forgive you because you caught feelings. I know I messed up. Messed up? He shook his head. You destroyed whatever this was. You killed it the moment you decided I wasn't worth the truth. That's not fair. Fair? Caleb's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? I opened up to you. I told you about Sarah, about the worst parts of my life. I let you into my home. I let you meet my son. And you couldn't even tell me your real name. Sienna was crying now, hot tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Caleb moved to the door, opening it. You need to leave. Please, leave now, before Owen wakes up and sees you. Sienna didn't move. She couldn't. If she left now, it was over. Completely over. There's something else, she said quietly. Something you need to know. I don't want to hear it. The man you met with today? The lawyer? He works for people who know about the evidence you have from Grayson. Sienna's words came fast now, desperate. They know you were there during the accident. They know you kept documentation. And they're not going to let that evidence go public. Caleb's expression changed. What are you talking about? Yeah. The accident wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with the equipment. People died, and it was covered up, and my business partner is the one who did it. She was talking too fast, stumbling over words. He knows about you, about us. He threatened me tonight, told me to walk away or he'd make sure you disappeared too. For a moment, Caleb just stared at her. Then he laughed, and it was the ugliest sound Sienna had ever heard. This is unbelievable, he said. You lied to me for months, and now you're trying to scare me? Make me think I'm in danger, so I'll what? Need you? I'm not making this up. Get out. His voice went cold. Get out of my house, stay away from me, and stay the hell away from my son. Caleb, please, out! The shout was loud enough to wake Owen. Sienna heard the bedroom door open, heard the small, sleepy voice call out, Dad? Caleb's expression crumbled. He looked at Sienna one more time, and the betrayal in his eyes was worse than any anger. Go, he said quietly. Please, just go. Sienna went. She made it to her car before the sobs hit her hard enough to double her over. She sat in the driver's seat, shaking, crying so hard she couldn't breathe, feeling like she'd just destroyed the best thing that had happened to her in years. Her burner phone buzzed. One text message from a number she didn't recognize. Smart choice. Now stay away from him. Sienna stared at the message, rage cutting through her grief like a knife. Damien was having her followed, which meant he knew she'd gone to warn Caleb, which meant Caleb was in more danger than ever. She wiped her eyes, started the car, and drove. Not to her penthouse, not to her office, to the one place she'd sworn she'd never go again. Her father's lawyer lived in a colonial mansion in the suburbs, the kind of place that screamed old money and older secrets. Sienna parked in the circular driveway and knocked on the door at 2 a.m. Richard Ashford answered in a bathrobe, looking like he'd aged 20 years since she'd last seen him. Sienna? He blinked at her. What are you? I need your help, she said. And I need you to not ask questions. Mates. Richard studied her for a moment. Her tear-stained face, her borrowed clothes, the desperation in her eyes, and stepped aside. Come in. They sat in his study, surrounded by law books and the ghosts of her father's empire. Richard poured them both scotch without asking, and Sienna told him everything. The tests, the disguise, Caleb, Owen, Damien's threat. The evidence from Grayson that could destroy Crosstech but might also be the only thing keeping Caleb and his son alive. When she finished, Richard was quiet for a long time. Your father would have burned the evidence and called it a Tuesday, he said finally. He wasn't a good man, Sienna, but he taught you one thing, right? Power is the only currency that matters. I don't want to be like him, Sienna whispered. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air between them. What did she want? She wanted to rewind 6 months and never create Celia. Never test Caleb, never fall in love with a man who now hated her, but that wasn't an option. I want Caleb safe, she said. Whatever it takes. Richard nodded slowly. Then here's what we're going to do. He talked for an hour, laying out a strategy that was risky and possibly illegal and definitely the kind of thing that would burn her entire life down. But it might save Caleb. It might give him and Owen a chance. This will destroy your company, Richard warned. Damien will go down, but so will Crosstech. Everything you've built, gone. I know. You'll be investigated, maybe charged. Your reputation will never recover. I know. And the man you're doing this for? Richard's voice gentled. He might never forgive you. You understand that? Sienna thought about Caleb's face when he told her to leave. The betrayal. The hurt. I know what, she whispered. Then we start tomorrow, Sha. Sienna drove back to her penthouse as the sun was rising. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except the single purpose burning in her chest. She was going to save Caleb Hunter, even if it meant destroying herself in the process. Her real phone rang as she was parking. Damien's name flashed on the screen. Sienna answered. Good morning, Damien said pleasantly. I trust you made the right choice last night? Yeah, Sienna said. I did. Excellent. Board meeting's at 9. Don't be late. He hung up. Sienna sat in her car watching the sunrise paint the city gold and allowed herself one moment of weakness. One moment to imagine what might have happened if she'd never created Celia. If she'd met Caleb as herself. If she'd been brave enough to trust without testing. But that wasn't the world she lived in. She got out of the car, walked into her building, and began planning the war that would either save the man she loved or destroy them both. The board meeting started at 9, but Sienna arrived at 8:30 with a locked briefcase and a plan that would either save her soul or cost her everything she'd spent 5 years building. Damien was already in the conference room, reviewing documents with the kind of casual confidence that came from never expecting consequences. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face that might have been approval. You look terrible, he said. Didn't sleep. Sienna set her briefcase on the table with more force than necessary. The sound echoed in the empty room. Relationship troubles will do that. Damien's smile was sharp enough to cut. But you made the right call. Hunter's a liability we don't need. Sienna didn't answer. She was too busy calculating how many minutes she had before the other board members arrived, and her window of opportunity closed forever. I need to ask you something, she said carefully, and I need you to be honest with me. Always am. The Grayson accident, you said you protected our interests, but those men who died, did you know they had families, kids? Damien's expression didn't change. Collateral damage, unfortunate but necessary. One of them had a daughter, Sienna continued, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. She was 4 when her father died. The company paid out a settlement, made her mother sign an NDA, and then everyone just moved on. Your point? My point is that you made me complicit in murder. Sienna met his eyes. I bought Meridian. I absorbed Grayson. That blood is on my hands too, whether I knew about it or not. You're being dramatic. What? Am I? Sienna opened her briefcase. Inside were copies of every document she'd found last night, organized and annotated with the kind of thoroughness that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Because I spent all night reading through the Meridian files, and you want to know what I found? Damien went very still. I found proof that you tampered with equipment, Sienna said quietly. I found payoffs to inspectors. I found the names of everyone you bribed to make the investigation disappear. And I found evidence that you've been skimming money from Crosstech for 3 years to cover your tracks. Put those away. Damien's voice went cold and flat. Right now. No. Sienna, you don't understand what you're... I understand perfectly. She pulled out more documents, spreading them across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. You've been using my company to commit fraud. You've been using my reputation as cover, and you threatened the man I love because he's the only person who could expose you. That man doesn't love you, Damien snapped. He's using you, just like everyone else. Maybe he is. Sienna's voice broke slightly. Or maybe he was the only honest person in my life, and I destroyed that because I was too broken to recognize it. Either way, I'm done lying. I'm done pretending, and I'm done protecting you. Damien stood up slowly, his face hardening into something Sienna had never seen before, something genuinely dangerous. You have no idea what you're doing, he said softly. You bring these accusations to the board, you destroy Crosstech. You destroy yourself. Everything you've built, gone. And for what? Some mechanic who hates you? For the truth, Sienna said, and because those men who died deserved better than being erased like they never mattered. They didn't matter, Damien said it flatly, like it was a simple fact. They were expendable, just like Hunter is expendable, just like you'll be if you don't put those files away and remember who made you powerful. You didn't make me powerful, Sienna shot back. You made me complicit. There's a difference. The conference room door opened. Board members started filing in, talking amongst themselves, oblivious to the grenade that was about to detonate in their laps. Damien leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. Last chance, Sienna. Walk away from this, and we both survive. Push it, and I'll bury you. Then start digging, Sienna whispered back. The meeting began. Sienna let them get through the preliminary reports and the financial updates. She let them discuss the Apex merger and quarterly projections and all the mundane business of running a billion-dollar company. She waited until Damien was mid-sentence, explaining why they needed to accelerate the acquisition timeline before she interrupted. I need to address something, she said, and her voice cut through the room like broken glass. 12 heads turned to look at her. 3 years ago, Crosstech acquired Meridian Industries, Sienna continued. That acquisition included a subsidiary called Grayson Automotive. What none of you knew, what I didn't know until last night, is that Grayson was the site of a workplace accident that killed 2 men and injured 3 others. The room went silent. The official investigation ruled it equipment failure, Sienna said. But it wasn't. The equipment was sabotaged to prevent those men from exposing a fraud scheme. And the person who orchestrated both the sabotage and the cover-up is sitting at this table. Every eye in the room shifted to Damien. This is absurd, Damien said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Sienna, You're clearly exhausted. I have documentation. Sienna opened her briefcase, pulling out the files. Testimony from witnesses who were paid to lie, financial records showing payoffs to inspectors, and evidence that Damien has been embezzling from Crosstech to fund the cover-up for 3 years. She started passing out copies. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been with the company since before Sienna's father died, looked up from the documents with an expression of pure horror. "This can't be real," Patricia said. "It's real." Sienna's voice was steady now, driven by a fury she hadn't known she possessed. "And I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove Damien Voss from this board and turn over all evidence to federal investigators." "You can't do this," Damien said. And now there was panic creeping into his voice. "You'll destroy the company." "You already destroyed it," Sienna shot back. "You turned it into a shell company for your crimes. I'm just cleaning up the mess." "If this goes public, Crosstech tanks," another board member said, his face pale. "Stock price crashes, investors flee." "I know." Sienna looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I know what this means. I know we'll probably lose everything. But those men who died deserve justice. Their families deserve the truth. And I won't spend another day protecting a murderer just to save my bank account." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia spoke first. The silence that followed. "I move to remove Damien Voss from the board, effective immediately." "Seconded," someone else said. The vote was unanimous. Damien stood there, his face a mask of rage and disbelief, as security was called to escort him from the building. When they arrived, he turned to Sienna one last time. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said quietly. "And when this is over, when you've lost everything, remember that I gave you a choice." "I'll remember," Sienna said. "I'll remember that I chose the truth over you. That's enough." They led him away. The board meeting dissolved into chaos. Patricia pulled Sienna aside, her expression grim. "You realize what happens next," Patricia said. "The SEC will investigate. Possibly the FBI. Crosstech will be torn apart. You'll be questioned, maybe charged as an accessory. I know. And you're doing this anyway? What?" Sienna thought about Caleb's face when he told her to leave. About Owen asking if she was going to be his new mom. About 2 men who'd died 6 years ago and the families they'd left behind. "I'm doing this anyway," she said. Patricia nodded slowly. "Your father would have handled this differently." "My father would have buried it and called it Tuesday," Sienna said. "I'm not my father. No." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "You're better than he was. I hope that's worth what it's about to cost you." Sienna hoped so too. The news broke 3 hours later. Sienna was in her office on the phone with the FBI when her assistant knocked frantically. "Miss Cross, you need to see this." Wasn't. Elena turned on the television. Every news channel was running the same story. Crosstech Industries embroiled in cover-up scandal. Damien Voss arrested. CEO Sienna Cross implicated in fraud. Except that wasn't quite right. The story was evolving in real time, reporters scrambling to understand what was actually happening. Some outlets were calling Sienna a whistleblower. Others were questioning how much she'd known. All of them were speculating about whether Crosstech would survive the day. Her phone started ringing. Investors, reporters, lawyers, people she barely knew calling to ask what the hell was happening. Sienna turned off her phone and sat in the sudden silence, watching her empire burn on live television. Her burner phone buzzed. One text message from an unknown number. "You really did it. You're either the bravest person I know or the stupidest. Either way, Caleb Hunter is safe now. No one's going to touch him when the whole world is watching. R. Richard Ashford, her father's lawyer, the man who'd helped her plan this controlled detonation." Sienna closed her eyes and let herself feel relief for exactly 10 seconds. Then she got back to work. The fallout was worse than anything she could have imagined. By the end of the week, Crosstech stock had dropped 40%. 3 major investors pulled out. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss Sienna's future with the company. Patricia broke the news to her privately, in Sienna's office, while CNN played on mute in the background. "They want you to step down," Patricia said. "Temporarily, they're calling it, until the investigation concludes." "Temporarily," Sienna repeated flatly. We both know that's not temporary. I voted against it, Patricia said. For what it's worth. You did the right thing, but doing the right thing doesn't always mean you get to keep your job. Sienna nodded. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for it, didn't make it hurt any less. I'll draft my resignation tonight, she said. Sienna, it's fine. She forced a smile that felt like it might crack her face. Really? This is what I wanted. Clean slate, fresh start. All those cliches. Patricia left. Sienna sat alone in her office, surrounded by the empire she'd built and was now losing, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do next. Her real phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Sienna Cross, speaking. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the FBI. We need you to come in for questioning regarding the Meridian Industries acquisition. Sienna closed her eyes. When? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Bring your lawyer. The call ended. Sienna sat there for a long moment, then started laughing. Bitter, exhausted laughter that turned into something that might have been crying if she'd had any tears left. She'd destroyed her company, lost her position, was about to be interrogated by federal investigators. And the man she'd done it all for hadn't spoken to her in 4 days. Her office door opened without warning. Sienna looked up, expecting Elena or another board member, or maybe a reporter who'd snuck past security. Instead, Caleb Hunter walked in. Sienna's heart stopped. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, wearing work clothes that were streaked with grease. His eyes were hard and his jaw was set, and he stood in the doorway like he was preparing for a fight. How did you get up here? Sienna managed. I'm a mechanic, Caleb said flatly. I fix things, including security elevators that mysteriously malfunction. Despite everything, Sienna felt something that might have been a smile trying to happen. That's illegal. Yeah, well, apparently I've got a thing for complicated women who break laws. The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. I saw the news, Caleb said finally. You blew up your entire company. Had to be done. Because of me. It wasn't a question. Because it was the right thing to do, Sienna corrected. You just happened to be the reason I finally found the guts to do it. Yeah, but... Caleb moved further into the office, looking around at the expensive furniture and the city views and the evidence of a life he'd never been part of. I've been watching the news for 4 days, he said, trying to figure out if you're a hero or a villain, if you destroyed Damien to protect me, or if this was just another power play. What did you decide? Sienna's voice came out smaller than she intended. I decided I don't know. Caleb looked at her, and his expression was complicated in ways she couldn't read. I decided that you lied to me for months, and that hurt like hell. But you also just sacrificed everything to keep me and Owen safe, which is... He stopped, shaking his head. I'm so angry at you, Ted, he said quietly. I'm furious. You played me. You tested me like I was some kind of science experiment. You made me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist. Celia exists, Sienna said desperately. She's the version of me that wasn't afraid. That could be honest. That felt safe enough to be vulnerable. Celia lied about everything, Caleb interrupted. Her job, her life, her name. You can't build a relationship on lies and then tell me the lies were actually truth. That's not how it works. Dor, chips, yimoham. I know, Sid. Do you? He moved closer and Sienna could see the exhaustion in his face, the pain. Because from where I'm standing, you're so used to playing chess with people that you forgot how to just be human with them. The words hit like a physical blow. You're right, Sienna whispered. I'm broken. I've been broken for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be whole. And I used you to try to fix myself, and that was wrong, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't change what happened. I know that too. Sienna stood up, moving around her desk to face him properly. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt Owen. I know I destroyed whatever we had. But I need you to understand something. She took a breath, steadying herself. When I met you, I was testing you, she said. That's true. But somewhere between the first date and the science museum and watching you with your son, I stopped testing and started falling. And the woman who fell in love with you? That wasn't Celia or Sienna. That was just me, the real me, underneath all the armor and the fear. How am I supposed to know that? Caleb asked, and his voice cracked slightly. How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've lied about everything? You're not. Sienna felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes. You're not supposed to trust me. I haven't earned that. But I'm asking you to believe that what I felt was real. What I feel is real, even if everything else was a lie. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Owen drew a picture, he said finally. Yesterday. It was the three of us at the Science Museum. He hung it on the fridge, and then he asked me when Celia was coming back. Sienna's throat closed up. What did you tell him? I told him you couldn't come back, Caleb said. I told him you had to go away. And he cried for an hour because he doesn't understand why people leave. His mom left. Now you left. And I had to explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes people aren't who we think they are. I'm so sorry, Sienna whispered. Yeah. Caleb's voice was rough. Me too. He turned to leave. Wait, Sienna said desperately. Please, just wait. Caleb stopped but didn't turn around. I'm being questioned by the FBI tomorrow, Sienna said. I'm probably going to be charged as an accessory to Damien's crimes, even though I didn't know about them. I'm losing my company, my reputation, everything I've spent 5 years building, and I'm doing it all because you were right about me. That made him turn around. What? You said I forgot how to be human, Sienna said. You were right. I spent so long protecting myself that I forgot what I was protecting. I forgot that power without purpose is just fear dressed up as strength, and I was so afraid of being used that I became the user. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But then I met you, she continued, and you were kind without expecting anything in return. You were honest even when it cost you. You loved your son more than you loved your own comfort, and you made me remember what it felt like to be human. Sienna's, I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said quickly. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking you to believe that you changed me, that knowing you made me want to be better than I was, and that's worth losing everything else. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. I don't know what to do with this, Caleb said finally. I don't know how to process any of this. You don't have to do anything, Sienna said. I just needed you to know. That's all. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The FBI is questioning you tomorrow? He asked. 8 a.m. Do you have a lawyer? My father's old attorney, Richard Ashford. He helped me plan all this. Caleb nodded slowly like he was processing something. Okay, good. You'll need someone who knows what they're doing. Yeah. Another silence. I should go, Caleb said. Owen's with my sister, and I told her I'd pick him up by 6. Okay. He made it to the door before Sienna spoke again. Caleb? He paused. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming here, for listening. It means more than you know. Yeah, well... Caleb looked back at her, and something in his expression softened slightly. I needed to see you. Needed to understand why you did what you did. I think I get it now. Doesn't mean I'm not still angry, but I get it. He left without saying anything else. Sienna stood alone in her office, watching the door close, feeling like something fundamental had shifted without her quite understanding how. That night, Sienna went home to her penthouse and started packing. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, documents, her mother's jewelry that she'd kept locked away for 15 years. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, boxing up pieces of a life that no longer fit. Her real phone rang at midnight. Patricia. Don't answer questions tomorrow, Patricia said without preamble. Let your lawyer handle it. The FBI is building a case against Damien, but they're going to try to implicate you too if they can. Be careful. I will. And Sienna? Patricia's voice softened. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you did took courage. Or stupidity, Sienna said, echoing Richard's words from days ago. Sometimes courage and stupidity look the same until you know how the story ends. After the call ended, Sienna stood at her window, looking out at the city that had been her kingdom and her prison for 5 years. Somewhere out there, Caleb was putting Owen to bed. reading him stories about dinosaurs, tucking him in with the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or tests. And Sienna was here, in her expensive cage, preparing to lose everything she'd fought so hard to build. But for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The FBI interrogation lasted 6 hours. Sienna sat in a gray room with gray walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look like a crime scene, Richard beside her, and answered questions until her voice went hoarse. Had she known about the sabotage? No. Had she suspected Damien of illegal activity? Not until she found the files. Why had she waited to report it? Because she'd been gathering evidence to make sure the case would stick. Had she profited from the cover-up? Only in the sense that Crosstech's value increased after the acquisition, but she hadn't known the acquisition was built on murder. The agents didn't believe her at first, or they pretended not to believe her, testing her story for cracks. But Richard had coached her well. And more importantly, Sienna was telling the truth. The documentation she'd turned over backed up every word. By the end of the day, they let her go with a warning not to leave the state. "They're not going to charge you," Richard said when they were finally outside, breathing fresh air that tasted like freedom. "Damien's cooperating, trying to cut a deal. He's confirmed you weren't involved." "Oh, it saw sipa." "Because he knows if he implicates me, I'll stop cooperating with the prosecution," Sienna said tiredly. "Exactly. You're safe. For now." Safe. The word felt foreign. Sienna went home and slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, her burner phone had 7 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. She called it back. "Miss Cross?" A woman's voice, professional and careful. "This is Detective Morrison. We need to talk to you about Caleb Hunter." Sienna's blood went cold. "What about him?" "There was an incident last night at his garage. Someone tried to break in. Hunter and his son were inside. They're okay, but we think it might be connected to the Damien Voss case." Sienna was already moving, grabbing her keys, heading for the door. "Where are they?" she demanded. "City Hospital. Hunter was injured trying to protect his son. Nothing life-threatening, but—" Sienna hung up and ran. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Sienna parked illegally and sprinted through the emergency room doors, demanding to know where Caleb Hunter was, not caring that she probably looked insane. A nurse directed her to the 3rd floor. Sienna took the stairs because the elevator was too slow, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She found them in a private room. Owen was curled up in a chair, asleep, his face tear-stained. Caleb was in the hospital bed, bandaged and bruised, but awake. When he saw her, something complicated flashed across his face. "You came," he said. "Of course I came." Sienna moved into the room, careful not to wake Owen. "What happened?" The detective said someone broke in. "3 guys, Caleb said, his voice rough. "Wearing masks. They came through the garage around midnight. I heard them downstairs making noise. Owen was already asleep. I grabbed him and locked us in the bedroom, called 911, but they tried to force the door. His hands were shaking slightly. "I had to fight them," he said quietly. "Had to keep them away from Owen. One of them had a crowbar, caught me across the ribs, but I held them off until the cops showed up." Sienna felt rage burning through her veins like poison. "This was Damien," she said flatly. "He sent them. He's in custody, but he still has connections." "I know." Caleb looked at her, and his eyes were exhausted. "The cops already told me. They think Voss ordered it from jail, trying to destroy the evidence I have, or scare me into not testifying." "I'll kill him," Sienna said, and meant it with every cell in her body. "Get in line." Caleb tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "Owen's terrified. He won't leave my side, keeps asking if the bad men are coming back." Sienna looked at the sleeping 6-year-old, her heart breaking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault. I brought this into your life." "Stop." Caleb's voice was firm. "You didn't bring this into my life. I've been carrying this evidence for 6 years. This was always going to catch up to me eventually. You just forced it into the open. That doesn't make it better. It makes it survivable," Caleb interrupted. Because now Damien's in custody, and everyone knows about the evidence. He can't disappear me quietly anymore. So yeah, last night was terrifying. But it's over. We're safe now. Sienna wanted to believe that, wanted to believe the danger had passed, but she'd spent too many years learning that powerful men didn't go down easy. I'm hiring security, she said. For you and Owen. 24-hour protection until this is completely resolved. I can't afford that. I can. Sienna's voice left no room for argument. And I'm doing it whether you like it or not. You and Owen are not going to be vulnerable because of me. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. You really meant it, he said finally. What you said in your office about doing this all for me. Yes, that's insane. But there was something in his voice that wasn't quite anger anymore. You destroyed your entire life. No, Sienna said quietly. I destroyed a lie I'd been living. There's a difference. Owen stirred in his chair, making a small, distressed sound. Sienna moved without thinking, going to him, gently touching his shoulder. Hey, buddy, she said softly. It's okay. You're safe. Owen's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he looked confused. Then he saw her, and his face crumpled. Celia, he sobbed, and launched himself at her. Sienna caught him, holding him while he cried into her shoulder, whispering that he'd been so scared, that the bad men were so loud, that he thought they were going to hurt his dad. It's over, Sienna said, rocking him gently. You're safe now. Your dad's safe. The bad men are gone. Promise? Owen's voice was muffled against her shirt. Sienna looked at Caleb over Owen's head. Caleb's expression was complicated, grief and gratitude and something else she couldn't quite name. I promise, Sienna said, and prayed she wasn't lying. Owen fell asleep in Sienna's arms 20 minutes later, exhausted from crying and fear and the kind of trauma no 6-year-old should have to carry. She held him carefully, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile trust had just been rebuilt between them. Caleb watched from the hospital bed, his expression shifting through emotions Sienna couldn't quite track. Pain from his injuries, exhaustion from the attack, something else that looked dangerously close to softening. You can put him back in the chair, Caleb said quietly. Your arms have to be tired. I'm fine. Sienna adjusted her grip slightly, and Owen made a small sound but didn't wake. He needs this. Yatin? Caleb's voice went rough. He does. A nurse came in to check Caleb's vitals, took one look at the scene, and left without saying anything. The silence that followed felt different than the angry silences of the past week. Heavier, maybe. More complicated. The security team starts tomorrow, Sienna said finally. 2 guards, rotating shifts. One stays with you and Owen at all times. The other monitors the garage and the apartment. That's excessive. Damien tried to have you killed, Sienna interrupted flatly. From jail. Through hired thugs who broke into your home while your son was sleeping. Excessive is the baseline now. Caleb opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked down at his bandaged hands, the bruises already starting to darken on his arms. I couldn't protect him, he said quietly. I locked the door and I fought. But if those cops hadn't shown up when they did... But they did, Sienna said firmly. You kept Owen safe. You did everything right. I put him in danger in the first place. Caleb's voice cracked. I kept that evidence instead of destroying it. I thought I was being brave, standing up for those guys who died. But all I did was paint a target on my kid's back. No. Sienna shifted carefully, keeping Owen secure. You did the right thing. Those men deserve justice. Their families deserve the truth. You were the only person brave enough to make sure they got it. Some bravery, Caleb said bitterly. My son is traumatized because I couldn't let go of the past. Your son is traumatized because a murderer sent criminals to silence you, Sienna corrected. That's not on you. That's on Damien. And on me, for not seeing what he was sooner. Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You really did blow up your entire life. Well, he said. For me? For Owen. For people you never even met. And for the truth? Sienna said. And because you were right. I forgot how to be human. I forgot that power without purpose is just fear. And I was so afraid of being used that I became the worst version of myself. Owen stirred slightly, and Sienna automatically started rocking him, the motion instinctive and surprisingly natural. "You're good with him," Caleb said softly. "He's easy to be good with." Sienna looked down at the sleeping child. "He's brave and smart and kind. You raised him right." "Sarah raised him right," Caleb said. "I'm just trying not to screw it up." "You're not screwing it up." Sienna met his eyes. "You're doing an amazing job. Owen knows he's loved. That's the most important thing." The silence that followed felt less jagged, almost comfortable. "I'm still angry at you," Caleb said eventually. "Just so we're clear, I'm furious about the lies, about Celia, about all of it. I know. But I also—" He stopped, struggling with something. "I also understand why you did it. Not agreeing with it, but understanding it. There's a difference." "Yeah," Sienna whispered. "There is." Another nurse came in, this time more insistent about checking Caleb's injuries. Sienna carefully transferred Owen back to the chair, tucking a blanket around him. The little boy mumbled something about velociraptors, but didn't wake. "You should go home," Caleb said after the nurse left. "Get some rest. You look as exhausted as I feel." "I'm not leaving you vulnerable." "The cops have a guard posted outside," Caleb interrupted. "And you said security starts tomorrow. We're safe for tonight. You don't have to stay." But the thing was, Sienna wanted to stay, wanted to sit in this uncomfortable hospital room and watch over them both, making sure nothing else bad happened, making sure Damien's reach didn't extend past the jail cell where he belonged. "What if they come back?" she asked quietly. "They won't." Caleb's voice was certain. "The cops arrested 2 of them. The 3rd one ran. Damien's connection to the attack is already being investigated. He's done. This is over." Sienna wanted to believe that. But she'd spent too long in boardrooms learning that nothing was ever truly over. There were always loose ends, always people who held grudges, always consequences that came due when you least expected them. "I'll leave when Owen wakes up," she compromised. "So he knows I didn't just disappear again." Caleb studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, that's fair." Sienna settled into the other chair, the one that wasn't occupied by a sleeping 6-year-old, and tried to get comfortable. The chair was designed to punish anyone who attempted rest. She was pretty sure it violated several humanitarian conventions. "Thank you," Caleb said suddenly, "for coming, for the security, for—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything. "For caring, even though I've been an ass about it." "You haven't been an ass," Sienna said. "You've been hurt. There's a difference." Still, Caleb's eyes were starting to droop, the pain medication kicking in. "I appreciate it, everything you've done, even if I'm not ready to forgive you yet." "I don't need forgiveness," Sienna said quietly. "I just need you and Owen safe." Caleb fell asleep before he could respond. Sienna sat there in the fluorescent hospital light, watching them both breathe, and felt something fundamental shift in her chest. She'd spent 5 years testing people, building walls, protecting herself from betrayal by never allowing anyone close enough to hurt her. But sitting here, in this uncomfortable chair, watching a man and his son sleep after barely surviving an attack that was her fault, Sienna realized something important. Love wasn't about protection. It was about vulnerability, about choosing to risk everything for someone else's safety, even when they couldn't promise not to hurt you. She'd tested Caleb to see if he was worthy of trust, but he'd been testing her too, testing whether she was capable of being honest, of being real, of choosing truth over comfort. And she'd failed that test spectacularly. But maybe, just maybe, she was getting a second chance to pass it. Owen woke up around 3 in the morning, disoriented and scared. Sienna was awake immediately, moving to him before he could start crying and wake his father. "Hey," she whispered. "You're okay. You're in the hospital, remember? Your dad's right there. He's sleeping." Owen rubbed his eyes, looking around with the confused suspicion of a child pulled from nightmares. "Did the bad men come back?" he asked, his voice small. "No." Sienna knelt in front of him, meeting his eyes. "They're gone. The police caught them. They can't hurt you anymore. Promise?" It was the second time he'd asked her to promise something she couldn't guarantee. But looking at his face, seeing the fear there, Sienna couldn't bring herself to hedge with careful words. "I promise," she said. "You're safe now." Owen threw his arms around her neck, holding on tight. Sienna hugged him back, feeling her heart crack wider. "I missed you," Owen whispered. Dad said you couldn't come back, but I missed you anyway. I missed you too, Sienna said, and meant it with painful intensity. Are you going to leave again? The question hit like a knife between the ribs. Sienna pulled back slightly, looking at Owen's face. He was 6 years old and had already lost his mother and watched his father get hurt and learned that adults lied about things that mattered. She could lie now, could promise to stay forever, promise that everything would be okay, promise that she'd never hurt him again. But Owen deserved better than more lies. I don't know, Sienna said honestly. Your dad is still really mad at me, and he has good reasons to be mad. I did something wrong, and I'm trying to make it right, but that doesn't mean he has to forgive me. Owen processed this with the serious expression of someone much older. What did you do wrong? He asked. I lied about who I was, Sienna said carefully. I pretended to be someone different because I was scared, and that hurt your dad, and I'm really sorry about that. My dad doesn't like lies, Owen said matter-of-factly. He says lies make everything worse. Your dad is right. Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking, but you came back when the bad men came. That's not lying. No, Sienna agreed. That's not lying. And you're helping us be safe. Dad said you're paying for guards and stuff. Yes. So maybe you did a bad thing, but you're trying to do good things now? Owen looked up at her with eyes that were far too wise for 6 years old. That's what Dad always tells me when I make mistakes, that I have to try to make it better. Sienna felt tears burning behind her eyes. You're a very smart kid, you know that? I know. Owen said it with the confidence of someone who'd been told this frequently. I'm going to be a paleontologist and a firefighter and run an ice cream truck. Despite everything, Sienna laughed. That's a good plan. Will you be there? Owen asked suddenly. When I do all that stuff? Will you come see? The question was so earnest, so hopeful, that Sienna couldn't breathe. I hope so, she whispered. I really, really hope so. Owen nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. He yawned hugely, his exhaustion catching up with him again. Can you stay until I fall asleep? He asked. Of course. Sienna helped him get comfortable in the chair, tucking the blanket around him. She sat on the floor beside him, her back against the wall, and held his hand while he drifted off. When she looked up, she found Caleb awake, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. How much of that did you hear? She asked quietly. Enough. His voice was rough, but not angry. You told him the truth about why I'm mad. He deserved the truth. Most people would have lied, Caleb said, would have told him everything was fine, not to worry. You didn't. I'm done lying, Sienna said simply, to anyone about anything. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I believe you. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A step toward trust, maybe, or at least toward understanding. Sienna stayed until the sky outside started turning gray with dawn. Then she carefully extracted her hand from Owen's, kissed the top of his head, and stood up. Security team arrives at 8, she told Caleb. Their names are Marcus and Jennifer. They're both ex-military, both trained in family protection protocols. Marcus will handle the overnight shifts. Jennifer takes days. They'll coordinate with the police detail until Damien's trial is over. How much is this costing you? Caleb asked. Less than what I'm about to lose in the Crosstech bankruptcy, Sienna said honestly. Money's the least of my problems right now. Still, let me do this, Sienna interrupted. Please, let me do this one thing right. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Sienna left before she could do something stupid like cry or beg him to forgive her or promise things she had no right to promise. The drive back to her penthouse felt longer than it should have. The city was waking up, early morning traffic starting to clog the streets. Sienna drove on autopilot, her mind replaying Owen's question over and over. Will you be there? She didn't know. She couldn't promise. Caleb might never forgive her. Owen might grow up and forget about the woman who'd pretended to be someone else. Life might move on without her in it, and she'd have to live with that. But she could make sure they were safe. She could make sure Damien paid for what he'd done. She could use the last pieces of her power to protect the people she loved, even if they never loved her back. That would have to be enough. Sienna spent the next 2 weeks dismantling her old life with surgical precision. Crosstech declared bankruptcy on a Tuesday. The stock became worthless by Wednesday. Thursday, federal investigators seized the company's assets and began the long process of unwinding Damien's fraud. Sienna cooperated with every investigation, handed over every document, answered every question. Richard warned her she was making herself vulnerable, that prosecutors could decide to charge her anyway, that cooperation didn't guarantee immunity. She did it anyway. The media had a field day. Some outlets called her a whistleblower hero. Others questioned why she hadn't seen the corruption sooner. A few accused her of orchestrating the whole thing, of throwing Damien under the bus to save herself. Sienna stopped reading the news after the first week. Her penthouse went up for sale. She didn't need 2,300 square feet of marble floors and city views anymore. Didn't need the expensive art or the designer furniture or any of the things she'd bought to prove she'd made it. She moved into a modest apartment across town, the kind of place Celia might have actually been able to afford. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with outdated appliances, a view of the building next door. It felt more like home than the penthouse ever had. Patricia called her one night, 3 weeks after the board meeting that had changed everything. The bankruptcy cleared, Patricia said without preamble. Damien's been charged with second-degree murder, fraud, embezzlement, and about 15 other felonies. You're officially clear. No charges, no investigation, nothing. You're free. Bas such or share. Free. The word felt foreign. What about Crosstech? Sienna asked. Being liquidated. The parts that weren't tied to Damien's schemes will be sold off. Employees will get severance. It's not great, but it could have been worse. And the families? Sienna's voice went quiet. The men who died at Grayson? Settlement negotiations started yesterday, Patricia said. Substantial compensation, public apology, full disclosure of what happened. It's not justice, but it's something. Sienna closed her eyes, feeling relief and grief in equal measure. Thank you for telling me. Sienna? Patricia's voice softened. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did. After the call ended, Sienna sat in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes she hadn't finished unpacking, and let herself cry for the first time since the hospital. She cried for the company she'd lost, for the reputation she'd destroyed, for the version of herself who'd thought power was the same as protection. She cried for Caleb and Owen, who were safe now but might never trust her again. And she cried because she was free, and freedom hurt more than she'd expected. The security team sent her weekly reports. Caleb and Owen were adjusting. No more incidents, no more threats. Damien's connections had been severed, his assets frozen, his power dismantled. They were safe. Sienna didn't visit, didn't call. Gave them space to heal without her complicating things. But she thought about them constantly. Wondered if Owen was still drawing pictures of dinosaurs. If Caleb had managed to keep the garage running while recovering from his injuries. If they talked about her. Or if she was becoming just another person who'd passed through their lives and left. 6 weeks after the hospital, Sienna's doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. She answered it in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back, no makeup, looking nothing like the CEO she used to be. Caleb stood in the hallway holding a cup of coffee in each hand. Sienna's heart stopped. Hi, he said. Hi. Her voice came out hoarse. Can I come in? Sienna stepped aside, trying not to shake. Caleb walked into her small apartment, looking around with the same careful attention he'd given her office weeks ago. This is different, he said. Yeah, Dean. Sienna closed the door, buying herself time to think. The penthouse felt like a museum. This feels like a place where people actually live. Caleb handed her one of the coffees. I wasn't sure how you take it anymore. I brought cream and sugar in case. Black is fine, Sienna took the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent electricity up her arm. How did you find me? Your lawyer gave me the address, Caleb said. I asked him where you were. He said you'd want to know I was looking. I did. Sienna's hand shook slightly around the coffee cup. I do. How are you? How's Owen? He's good. Therapy's helping. He still has nightmares sometimes, but they're getting better. Caleb moved to the window, looking out at the unimpressive view. Moved too. He asks about you constantly. Wants to know when Celia's coming back. I'm not Celia. Sienna said quietly. I know. Caleb turned to face her. But you're not just Sienna either, are you? You're somewhere in between. The woman who's scared to trust people and the woman who gave up everything to protect my son. Sienna didn't know how to respond to that. I've been thinking, Caleb continued, about what you said in your office, about how I made you want to be human again, and I realized something. What? Well, you did the same thing for me. Caleb's voice was soft. After Sarah died, I shut down. I was just going through the motions, surviving, work, and Owen, and nothing else. I told myself that was enough, that I didn't need anything more. He took a breath. But then I met you, he said, and you were kind and funny, and you made me remember what it felt like to want something for myself. Not just as Owen's dad or as someone's employee, just as me. Caleb, I'm not done, he interrupted gently. You lied to me. That still hurts. I'm still processing it. But I also lied to myself for 6 years, thinking I could just hide from the past and it wouldn't catch up to me. We're both guilty of not being honest. That's not the same thing. Maybe not, Caleb agreed. But it's close enough. And here's what I figured out. I can stay angry at you forever, or I can try to understand why you did what you did. And understanding doesn't mean forgiving. Not yet. But it means I'm willing to try. Sienna felt tears starting to burn. What are you saying? I'm saying I miss you, Caleb said simply. Owen misses you. And I know you're not Celia, and I know you're not the CEO anymore either. I don't know who you are now, but I'd like to find out. If you're willing, I destroyed everything, Sienna whispered. My company, my reputation, my life. I don't have anything to offer you. No money, no power, nothing. You have yourself, Caleb interrupted. The real you. Not Celia, not the billionaire. Just the woman who sacrificed everything to keep my son safe. That's enough. As I said. You're sure? Sienna's voice broke. Because I can't do this halfway. I can't be part of your life and then lose you again. It'll kill me. I'm not sure of anything, Caleb admitted. I don't know if this works. I don't know if we can build something real after everything that happened. But I know I want to try. If you do. Sienna set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. She moved closer to him, close enough to see the fading bruises on his face from the attack, the exhaustion still lingering in his eyes. I want to try, she whispered. I want to try so badly. It scares me. Oh, good. Caleb smiled, and it was real and uncertain and hopeful all at once. Because Owen's with my sister right now, and I told him I was going to ask you if you wanted to have breakfast with us next Saturday. At the diner. The one with the pancakes. The one where we had our second date, Sienna said. Yeah. Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. I figured we could start over. Do it right this time. No lies, no tests. Just two people trying to figure out if they can make this work. And Owen? Owen will be over the moon, Caleb said. But we take it slow. Let him adjust. Let all of us adjust. No rushing into anything. Slow, Sienna repeated. I can do slow. Yeah? Yeah. Caleb squeezed her hand gently. So Saturday, 9 a.m.? I'll be there. He left a few minutes later and Sienna stood alone in her small apartment, holding the half-finished coffee he'd brought her, feeling like something impossible had just happened. She'd lost everything. Her company, her reputation, her carefully constructed life. But she'd gained something too. Something she'd spent 5 years testing for and never finding. A second chance. The week leading up to Saturday moved in slow motion. Sienna changed her outfit 7 times, finally settling on jeans and a sweater that were nice but not trying too hard. She practiced things to say to Owen, ways to explain why she'd been gone, how to be honest without being overwhelming. She arrived at the diner 5 minutes early and sat in her car, trying to calm her racing heart. Caleb's truck pulled up at exactly 9. Owen tumbled out of the passenger side, saw Sienna's car, and started jumping up and down with excitement. Sienna got out slowly, and Owen sprinted over, wrapping his arms around her waist with the uncomplicated joy of a 6-year-old who'd been given something he desperately wanted. You came back, he shouted. Dad said you might come back, but I didn't know if you would, but you did. I did, Sienna said, hugging him tight. I'm sorry I was gone so long. It's okay. Owen pulled back, grinning up at her. Dad said you had to do important stuff. Did you finish the important stuff? Most of it, Sienna said honestly. Good, because I have like 1,000,000 dinosaur facts to tell you, and Dad says he can't hear about the Jurassic period anymore or his brain will explode. Caleb walked over, shaking his head but smiling. I never said that. You said, Owen, please, I love you, but I cannot process any more information about pterodactyls today, Owen quoted precisely. That's different, Caleb protested. Sounds the same to me, Owen said sagely, taking Sienna's hand and dragging her toward the diner entrance. They ate breakfast while Owen talked nonstop about everything Sienna had missed. A new dinosaur book. A substitute teacher who let them have extra recess. A kid at school who said T-Rex had feathers, which was controversial but scientifically accurate. Sienna listened to all of it, soaking in the normalcy of it, the beautiful mundanity of a little boy's life continuing despite everything that had happened. Caleb watched them both with an expression that was complicated but not unhappy. After breakfast, Owen announced he wanted to go to the park. The same park they'd gone to months ago, before everything fell apart. They walked there together, Owen running ahead, Caleb and Sienna following at a more measured pace. Thank you, Sienna said quietly. For this. For giving me another chance. Thank you for taking it, Caleb replied. I know this is hard for you. Being vulnerable. Trusting that I'm not going to use this against you. Old habits, Sienna admitted. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. No shoes, Caleb promised. Just one step at a time. See where it goes. They watched Owen play on the swings, his laughter carrying across the park. Other families were there too, living their normal Saturday morning lives, oblivious to the complicated history surrounding the three people by the playground. I'm opening a new shop, Caleb said suddenly. Bigger space. I'm bringing on 2 other mechanics, guys I trust. The security you hired gave me time to focus on the business, instead of just surviving. I'm actually building something now. That's amazing, Sienna said, meaning it. I want to do something else too, Caleb continued. Something Sarah always wanted. A training program. For people who need job skills but can't afford trade school. Single parents, mostly. People trying to rebuild their lives. Sienna turned to look at him, seeing the passion in his face as he described the idea. That's a beautiful plan, she said softly. It was Sarah's dream, Caleb said. I couldn't do it before because I was barely keeping my head above water. But now, with the expansion, with everything settling down, I think I can make it happen. Make something good come out of all this mess. You're a good man, Caleb Hunterson, Sienna said. I'm trying to be. He looked at her, and his smile was soft. You could help if you want. You know business, know how to build programs, know how to make things happen. No pressure, but the offer's there. Sienna felt something warm unfold in her chest. Purpose, maybe. Or the possibility of it. I'd like that, she said. I'd really like that. Owen called them over to push him on the swings. They spent the next hour taking turns, making him laugh, being present in the moment without worrying about the past or the future. It wasn't healing, not yet. The wounds were too fresh, the trust too fragile, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Sienna felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. 3 months passed in a rhythm that felt nothing like Sienna's old life, and everything like the one she'd been searching for without knowing it. She woke up in her modest apartment every morning, made coffee in a machine that cost $30 instead of $300, and walked to the garage where Caleb was building something that mattered. Not a billion-dollar empire, just an honest business that employed people and trained others and gave second chances to anyone willing to work for them. The training program launched on a Tuesday in October. 15 people showed up for the first session. Single mothers, recently released ex-convicts, immigrants with engineering degrees that nobody in this country would recognize, people who'd lost jobs and hope and needed both back desperately. Sienna taught the business side. How to balance books, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to market yourself when you had nothing but skill and determination. Caleb taught the mechanical work, how to diagnose problems, how to fix what was broken, how to build something with your hands that would last. Owen helped too, in his own way. He'd appointed himself the official greeter, welcoming each new student with handshakes and dinosaur facts, and the kind of unselfconscious warmth that made grown adults tear up. "You're good at this," Caleb told Sienna one evening after everyone had gone home. They were cleaning up the garage, putting away tools, the comfortable silence of people who'd learned to work together. "At teaching?" Sienna asked. "At caring?" Caleb looked at her across a workbench covered in parts and paperwork. "You spent so long protecting yourself that I don't think you realized how much you actually wanted to help people, how much you needed it." He wasn't wrong. The training program filled something in Sienna that Crosstech never had. Maybe because these people needed her skills, not her money. Maybe because she could see the direct impact. Maria landing a job at a dealership, Jerome opening his own small repair shop, Linda gaining custody of her kids back because she could finally support them. Or maybe because this work didn't require her to be anyone but herself. No disguises, no tests, just showing up and doing the work and trusting that it mattered. "I think I was looking for purpose in the wrong places," Sienna said quietly. "I thought power was the same as meaning, that if I was successful enough, important enough, untouchable enough, I'd finally feel like I mattered." "And now?" Caleb asked. "Now I matter to 15 people who are trying to rebuild their lives," Sienna said. "That feels bigger than any merger I ever closed." Caleb smiled, and it was the soft kind of smile that meant he understood exactly what she couldn't quite articulate. They'd been taking it slow, just like he'd promised. Saturday breakfasts, occasional dinners, careful moments of rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. Caleb hadn't kissed her again since that first time months ago, and Sienna hadn't pushed. She understood that trust couldn't be rushed, especially when it had been shattered so completely. But there were small things. His hand finding hers when they walked Owen to the park. The way he'd started texting her throughout the day, sharing stupid jokes or asking her opinion on business decisions. How Owen had started calling her just Sienna instead of Celia, accepting that the person she'd been pretending to be was gone, and the real her was worth knowing anyway. It wasn't smooth. There were hard conversations, times when Caleb would shut down because something reminded him of the lies. Moments when Sienna's old instincts kicked in and she'd start performing instead of being present, and Caleb would call her on it gently but firmly. But they kept showing up, kept trying, kept choosing honesty even when it was uncomfortable. The trial started in November. Damien Voss faced 15 charges ranging from murder to fraud, to witness tampering. The prosecution's case was airtight, built on the documentation Sienna had turned over and the testimony of everyone he'd ever threatened or bribed. Sienna was called to testify on the fourth day. Walking into that courtroom felt surreal. She wore a simple dress, nothing expensive, nothing designed to intimidate. She wasn't the CEO anymore. Wasn't the powerful woman who'd commanded boardrooms. She was just someone who'd found evidence of crimes and chosen to do the right thing, even when it cost her everything. Damien sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered, older. He watched her take the stand with an expression she couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or resignation. The prosecutor asked her to describe what she'd found in the Meridian files. Sienna answered honestly, methodically, walking the jury through evidence of equipment sabotage and payoffs and 2 men who'd died because they'd threatened to expose fraud. Damien's lawyer tried to paint her as an opportunist, someone who'd orchestrated the whole thing to remove a business partner she no longer wanted, someone who'd destroyed a company to cover her own incompetence. "Isn't it true, Ms. Cross," the defense attorney asked, "that you benefited financially from Mr. Voss's alleged crimes?" "Yes," Sienna said clearly. "Crosstech's value increased after the Meridian acquisition. I profited from that. And when I learned how that profit was made, I destroyed the company rather than continue benefiting from murder." "Very convenient," the lawyer said, "after you'd already made your fortune." "Nothing about this was convenient," Sienna shot back. "I lost my company, my reputation, and my entire life. If I'd wanted convenience, I would have buried the evidence and protected the money. I chose justice instead." The lawyer tried a few more angles, but Sienna didn't budge. She'd spent 3 months learning to be honest, and she wasn't going back to careful deflections and strategic half-truths. When she stepped down, Caleb was waiting in the hallway. He'd taken the day off to be there, had arranged for his sister to watch Owen. "You did good," he said simply. "It doesn't feel good," Sienna admitted, "knowing I was part of it, even if I didn't know." "You weren't part of it," Caleb said firmly. You were used by it. There's a difference. And the moment you knew the truth, you fixed it. That's what matters. They sat in the courthouse cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee, waiting for Caleb's turn to testify. He'd been called as a witness to describe what he'd seen at Grayson, what documentation he'd kept, why he'd been too afraid to come forward until Sienna had made it safe. Are you nervous? Sienna asked. Terrified, Caleb admitted. I've been hiding from this for 6 years. Now I have to stand up in front of everyone and admit I knew people died, and I kept quiet because I was scared. You weren't just scared, Sienna said. You were protecting Owen. Any parent would have done the same thing. Maybe. Caleb stared into his coffee. But those guys who died, they had families too. Kids who grew up without fathers because I wasn't brave enough to speak up. You're speaking up now, Sienna pointed out. That takes courage too. When Caleb's name was called, Sienna squeezed his hand. He walked into the courtroom with his shoulders back and his head up, and Sienna felt a rush of pride so fierce it nearly took her breath away. She waited in the hallway, unable to sit still, paced back and forth until a bailiff asked her to please find a seat or leave. Caleb emerged 45 minutes later, looking exhausted but relieved. How'd it go? Sienna asked. I told the truth, Caleb said simply. All of it. What I saw, what I knew, why I kept quiet. Damien's lawyer tried to make me look like a coward. I didn't argue with him. I was a coward, but I'm not anymore. They left the courthouse together, walking out into November sunlight that felt cleaner somehow, lighter. Thank you, Sil, Caleb said suddenly. For what? For making this possible. He stopped walking, turning to face her on the courthouse steps. I couldn't have done this alone. Couldn't have stood up there without knowing you'd already sacrificed everything to protect me and Owen. You gave me courage I didn't know I had. You always had it, Sienna said. You just needed someone to believe in you enough for you to believe in yourself. Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in 3 months. He pulled her close and kissed her, right there on the courthouse steps with lawyers and families and reporters walking past. It was different than the first time, less desperate, more certain. A kiss that said, we're trying and I'm scared and I think this might actually work. When they separated, Sienna was crying. Sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm not usually... Don't apologize, Caleb interrupted. I like seeing you be human. It's my favorite version of you. The verdict came down 2 weeks later, guilty on all counts. Damien Voss was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The judge called his crimes a callous disregard for human life in pursuit of profit, and said the sentence reflected the severity of destroying families for financial gain. Sienna watched it happen on the news, sitting in Caleb's apartment with Owen asleep in his room and Caleb beside her on the couch. It's over, Caleb said quietly. It's really over. Yeah, Sienna whispered. It is. She waited to feel relief, triumph, something big and dramatic that matched the magnitude of what they'd been through. Instead, she just felt tired and grateful and ready to move forward. The families of the men who died at Grayson received their settlements in December. Sienna attended one of the meetings, even though her lawyer advised against it. She needed to look them in the eyes, needed them to know someone was sorry. Rachel Morrison, whose husband had died in the accident, stared at Sienna across a conference table with an expression that held 6 years of grief and rage. You didn't kill him, Rachel said finally. But you bought the company that covered it up. You profited from my husband's death. Yes, Sienna said simply. I did, and I'm sorry. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring him back. But I'm sorry. Rachel was quiet for a long time. My daughter asks about her father sometimes. She was 4 when he died. She doesn't remember much, just little things. How he smelled, his laugh. I've had to build him from stories and photographs because someone decided his life was less important than a business deal. I know, Sienna said, her voice breaking. I know, and it's not fair, and no amount of money will ever make it fair. But I need you to know I didn't stop when I found out. I destroyed my company. I testified against my business partner. I made sure everyone knew what happened. Because your husband mattered. because you and your daughter deserve the truth. But she or so. Rachel's eyes were wet. He would have liked that. Marcus was always about doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost him. She took a shaky breath. Thank you. For not just burying it, for choosing us over the money kits. After the meeting, Sienna sat in her car for 20 minutes, crying so hard she couldn't see. Caleb found her there. He'd driven separately, given his own testimony about what he'd witnessed, and didn't say anything, just sat with her until she could breathe again. You did a good thing, he said finally. Doesn't feel good, Sienna managed. Good things usually don't, Caleb said. That's how you know they matter. Christmas came with the kind of cold that made the whole city sparkle. Owen had requested a specific present that year, a family trip to the Natural History Museum to see the dinosaur exhibits. Not toys, not games, just time together. Sienna offered to pay for everything, tickets, lunch, whatever they needed, but Caleb refused. We split it, he said firmly. We're partners now. In the business, in this... He gestured vaguely between them. Whatever this is, partners split things. Even when one partner used to be a billionaire? Sienna asked. Especially then, Caleb said. That person doesn't exist anymore. You're just Sienna now. The woman who teaches ex-convicts how to read financial statements and lets my kid talk her ear off about pterodactyls. That's who I'm dating. Dating. The word made something warm bloom in Sienna's chest. Is that what we're doing? She asked. Dating? I think so, Caleb said. Unless you have a better word for it. Dating works, Sienna said, smiling. Dating's good. The museum trip was chaos in the best possible way. Owen insisted on reading every single placard, sharing every fact he already knew, correcting the museum's descriptions when they conflicted with his extensive dinosaur knowledge. Sienna and Caleb followed behind him, hands intertwined, watching a 6-year-old fall more in love with prehistoric creatures than most people fell in love with anything. He's happy, Caleb said quietly. Really happy. I wasn't sure he'd ever get there after everything that happened. The attack, the trial, all of it. But he's okay. He's resilient, Sienna said, like his dad. Or maybe he just needed stable ground under him, Caleb replied. Something I couldn't give him on my own. But with you helping, with the business stable, with everything finally settled, he can just be a kid again. They ate lunch in the museum cafeteria, Owen chattering between bites about how the Tyrannosaurus animatronic wasn't anatomically accurate because recent research suggested different posture. He's going to be a scientist, Sienna said, watching Owen with affection. Or a firefighter, Caleb reminded her. Or an ice cream truck operator. Why not all three? Sienna suggested. Owen overheard and nodded seriously. That's what I said. Keep your options open. After lunch, they wandered through the planetarium. The lights dimmed and stars appeared overhead, a simulation of the night sky as it had looked thousands of years ago. Owen pressed against Sienna's side, and she put her arm around him automatically, holding him close while Caleb's hand found hers in the darkness. This, Sienna thought, this is what I was looking for. Not power, not protection, not tests or walls or carefully constructed personas. Just this. Simple human connection. The warmth of a child against her side and a man's hand in hers, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found where she belonged. On New Year's Eve, Caleb's sister threw a small party. Just family and a few close friends, nothing fancy. Sienna almost didn't go, still uncertain about her place in Caleb's wider world. But Owen had asked specifically if she'd be there, and she couldn't say no to him. The party was loud and warm and full of people who'd known Caleb for years. His sister Maya pulled Sienna aside in the kitchen at one point, ostensibly to help with dishes, but really to conduct what felt like a gentle interrogation. He's happy, Maya said, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. I haven't seen him this happy since before Sarah died, and Owen adores you. But, Sienna prompted, because there was definitely a but coming. But he's been hurt before, Maya said carefully, and I'm his big sister. I'm required to make sure you're not going to hurt him again. I'm not, Sienna said simply. I made terrible mistakes. I lied, I tested him, I nearly destroyed everything. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm trying to be better. Trying to be worthy of the second chance he's giving me. Maya studied her for a long moment. He told me about Crosstech, about what you sacrificed. It wasn't a sacrifice, Sienna corrected. It was a choice, and I'd make it again. Good, Maya said, and her expression softened. Then welcome to the family. Fair warning, we're loud, we're opinionated, and we will absolutely give you shit if you deserve it. I can handle it, Sienna said, smiling. When midnight came, everyone gathered in the living room, counting down the seconds to a new year. Owen was falling asleep on the couch, exhausted from too much excitement and sugar. Caleb stood beside Sienna, their fingers intertwined, and when the countdown reached 0, he kissed her like they had all the time in the world. Happy New Year, he whispered against her lips. Happy New Year, Sienna whispered back. It felt like a promise, like a beginning. Like maybe this year would be the one where she finally stopped running from herself and learned to live in the truth, no matter how vulnerable it made her. Spring came with new students for the training program and new opportunities for the garage. Caleb hired 2 more mechanics, both graduates of the program. The shop was thriving, building a reputation for honest work and fair prices, and being a place that gave people chances they couldn't get elsewhere. Sienna's role had evolved too. She wasn't just teaching anymore, she was mentoring, counseling, helping people rebuild lives that had fallen apart. It wasn't corporate strategy or billion-dollar deals, but it was meaningful in ways those things never had been. One afternoon in April, Sienna got a call from Patricia Chen, her former board member from Crosstech. I have a proposition for you, Patricia said without preamble. A friend of mine runs a nonprofit focused on job training and economic development. They're looking for a director of programs. It's not glamorous. The pay is decent, but not exceptional, and it would mean traveling to different communities, setting up training centers similar to what you've built with Caleb. I thought of you. Sienna sat in her apartment, holding the phone, trying to process what Patricia was offering. A real job. Purpose. The chance to replicate what they'd built on a larger scale, helping more people, creating more opportunities. I need to think about it, Sienna said finally. And talk to Caleb. We're partners in the program here. Of course, Patricia said. But Sienna, you're good at this. Better than you ever were at running Crosstech, honestly. You were meant to help people, not just make money off them. After the call ended, Sienna sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what Patricia had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe Sienna had spent so long chasing the wrong kind of success that she'd missed what she was actually good at. That evening, she brought it up with Caleb while they were closing the garage for the night. It's a good opportunity, Caleb said after she'd explained. You should take it. But the program here will be fine, Caleb interrupted gently. I can run it. Maya's been talking about getting more involved now that her kids are older. We'll make it work. You shouldn't turn down something this important because you're worried about us. What if I'm gone too much? Sienna asked, voicing the fear she'd been carrying. What if the travel is too much and we lose this? She gestured between them. Whatever this is? Well, then we figure it out, Caleb said simply. You think I'm going to lose you because you're doing meaningful work? I'm not that fragile, and neither is what we have. You're sure? I'm sure. Caleb pulled her close, his arms solid and steady around her. You gave up everything for me once. I'm not going to ask you to give up opportunities now. We make this work together, or we don't deserve it in the first place. Sienna took the job. The next few months were an adjustment. She traveled to different cities, setting up training programs, teaching people the model she and Caleb had developed. She was gone more than she was home, living out of hotels and rental cars, exhausted most of the time. But it was good work, important work. She was helping people rebuild lives, creating pathways out of poverty and desperation, giving second chances to anyone willing to take them. And every time she came home, Caleb was there. They'd have dinner together, just the two of them after Owen went to bed, and Sienna would tell him about the people she'd met, the programs she'd started, the small victories that added up to something bigger. I'm proud of you, Caleb said one night, after she'd described a single mother in Detroit who'd landed a job at a repair shop after completing the training. You're changing lives. We're changing lives, Sienna corrected. This is our model, our program. I'm just replicating what we built together. Still, Caleb said, You're the one out there making it happen. Owen adjusted too. He'd started asking when Sienna was coming home, marking days on a calendar, planning elaborate dinosaur presentations for when she returned. He didn't seem bothered by her absence, just happy when she was there. It's because he knows you're coming back, Caleb explained one night. He knows you're not leaving permanently. That makes all the difference. Summer arrived hot and sticky. Sienna had been working the nonprofit job for 4 months, traveling constantly, but coming home every other weekend. She was exhausted and fulfilled in equal measure, living a life that finally felt aligned with who she actually was. On a Saturday in July, Caleb asked her to come to the garage, said he had something to show her. When Sienna arrived, she found the space transformed. The training area had been expanded, new equipment installed, motivational posters on the walls that read things like "Second chances start here" and "Skills for life." But what caught her attention was the plaque by the door. "Hunter and Cross Automotive Training Center," she read aloud. "Caleb, what is this?" "It's official," Caleb said, and he was grinning like a kid. "I registered it as a nonprofit. You and me, 50-50 partners. We're not just running a training program anymore. We're building an organization, something that can grow, that can help more people." Sienna stared at the plaque, her eyes burning with tears she didn't try to hide. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Yeah, I did," Caleb said. "Because none of this happens without you. You brought the vision, the structure, the belief that people deserve second chances. I just brought the garage and the mechanical know-how. We're partners. It's time it was official." "Yishmite Aspot Sassunit," Sienna threw her arms around him, holding on tight, feeling something fundamental click into place. This was her future, not running a billion-dollar company, not testing people or protecting herself behind walls of power and wealth. Just this: partnership, purpose, building something meaningful with someone who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her anyway. "I have something to ask you," Caleb said when she finally pulled back. "And you can say no. It won't change anything between us." "Okay," Sienna said, nervous suddenly. "Move in with us," Caleb said simply. "You're gone half the time anyway with the nonprofit work. But when you're here, you're staying in that apartment alone. And Owen keeps asking why you can't just live with us. And honestly, I'm asking the same question." Wushwas Ishmasam boys. Sienna's heart was pounding. "That's a big step." "It is," Caleb agreed. "But we've been taking small steps for almost a year now. I think we're ready for a big one, if you are." "What about Owen?" Sienna asked. "Have you talked to him about this?" "I asked him how he'd feel if you moved in," Caleb said. He said, and I quote, "That would be awesome because then Sienna could read me bedtime stories every night and Dad could stop burning dinner because she's better at cooking." Despite everything, Sienna laughed. "He's not wrong about the cooking." "So?" Caleb looked at her with hope and nervousness mixed together. "What do you say? What?" Sienna thought about her apartment, the space she'd moved into after losing everything, the place that had represented starting over. It had been necessary, a way station between her old life and whatever came next. But it wasn't home. Home was wherever Caleb and Owen were. "Yes," she said. "I want to move in. I want to wake up with you every morning I'm not traveling. I want to read Owen bedtime stories and teach him that velociraptors are the superior dinosaur. I want to build a life with you." Caleb kissed her then, deep and certain and filled with promise. When they separated, he was smiling so hard his face looked like it might split. "Owen's going to lose his mind," he said. "Good," Sienna said. "I hope he does." Moving in took 2 weeks. Sienna didn't have much to move. She'd sold or donated most of her expensive things when she left the penthouse. Just clothes, books, a few pieces of her mother's jewelry that meant something. Owen helped her unpack, appointed himself the official organizer, carefully arranging her things in the spare room that was now hers too. "This is good," he announced after surveying his work. "Now you can be here all the time when you're not traveling, and we can be a real family." A real family. The words settled into Sienna's chest like they'd always belonged there. That first night, after Owen was asleep and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Sienna and Caleb sat on the couch drinking cheap wine and talking about nothing important. The television played on mute, some late-night show neither of them was watching. "Thank you," Sienna said quietly. For what? For giving me a second chance, she said. For seeing past the lies and the mistakes. For teaching me that trust isn't something you test for. It's something you build, slowly, through showing up and being honest and choosing each other every day. You taught me things too, Caleb said. That it's okay to ask for help. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It just means making space for new people to love. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Caleb's arm around her shoulders, Sienna's head against his chest. I'm happy, Sienna said, surprising herself with the admission. I'm actually genuinely happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way. Yeah, Caleb said softly. Me too. Yes, Fitz. The seasons turned. Summer became fall, became winter, became spring again. Sienna traveled for work, building training programs across the country. Caleb expanded the garage, hired more staff, helped more people. Owen grew taller, lost teeth, moved from dinosaurs to space exploration with the same passionate intensity. They had hard days, days when Sienna's travel schedule was exhausting and she missed them desperately. Days when Caleb's old fears would resurface and he'd pull away slightly, needing space to process. Days when Owen acted out because change was hard and he was just a kid trying to navigate a complicated world. But they talked through it. They showed up for each other. They chose honesty even when it was uncomfortable. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they built something real. On a Saturday morning in May, almost 2 years after Sienna had first walked into Marco's restaurant wearing a disguise and a heart full of fear, she woke up to Owen jumping on the bed. Sienna! Sienna, wake up! It's the science fair today and you promised you'd come, and Dad's making pancakes, except they're kind of burned, but he tried. Sienna laughed, pulling Owen into a hug while Caleb appeared in the doorway holding a spatula and looking sheepish. They're not that burned, he protested. They're very burned, Owen said seriously. But we can eat them anyway because we're a family, and families support each other, even when the pancakes are basically charcoal. That's very mature of you, Sienna said, trying not to laugh. They ate the burned pancakes together at the wobbly kitchen table. They went to Owen's science fair and watched him explain his project on dinosaur extinction theories with passionate authority. They had dinner at the diner with the good pancakes, the place where Sienna and Caleb had their second first date, where everything had started to change. And later that night, after Owen was asleep, Caleb pulled Sienna onto the couch and held her close. I love you, he said. Not for the first time. They'd been saying it for months now, but somehow tonight it felt heavier, more significant. I love you too, Sienna whispered back. I want to marry you, Caleb said suddenly. Not right now, not today, but someday. When Owen's ready, when we're ready. I want to make this official. I want you to be my wife. Sienna's breath caught. Are you asking or telling? Yeah. My meet. Telling, Caleb said. Asking comes later, with a ring and everything. This is just me letting you know where my head's at. So you can tell me if I'm completely insane. You're not insane, Sienna said, tears streaming down her face. You're the sanest, most honest, most real person I've ever met. And yes, someday, when we're both ready, yes. They held each other in the dim light of their living room, two broken people who'd somehow found a way to heal together, and Sienna felt something she'd spent her entire life searching for. Peace. Not because everything was easy, not because the past didn't matter, but because she'd finally learned that trust wasn't something you tested for. It was something you earned through vulnerability and honesty and showing up even when it was hard. She'd been so afraid of being used that she'd used people instead. So afraid of betrayal that she'd betrayed her own humanity. So focused on protecting herself that she'd forgotten what she was protecting. But Caleb had taught her something important. That strength wasn't about building walls. It was about having the courage to tear them down. That power without purpose was just fear in expensive clothing. That the only test that mattered was whether you could look at yourself in the mirror and like what you saw. And for the first time in her life, Sienna could. She wasn't the CEO anymore. Wasn't the woman with the billion-dollar empire and the corner office and the guards around her heart. She was just Sienna, partner to Caleb, pseudo-mom to Owen, director of a nonprofit that gave people second chances she'd once been too afraid to take herself. She was flawed and human and real, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.